You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have Salt Lake County Councilwoman Shreen Gorbani and former State Representative Holly Richardson. Ladies, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Happy to be.
Very busy week. Let's start off with abortion. What we're starting to see across the country is states taking matters into their own hands, passing laws. We're seeing really, between states, some extremes on one side and the other. As we take a look at states making new laws, what should we make of this? Shreen, let's start with you.
Well, the question I'm always asking myself is, where are we talking about sort of the bigger issues around this? Are we advancing conversations about healthcare, making sure that women aren't in a situation where they have to make this kind of decision, expanding access to education so that people know that when they're engaging, that they could potentially have an unplanned pregnancy? So what are we doing to really make sure that's not happening?
Holly, let's bring you in. What should we make of states taking action on these issues? I mean, like I said, New York is taking steps, Alabama taking steps, even here in the state of Utah, we're taking steps.
I think there's some thought or sentiment that there's a possibility that Roe v. Wade could be overturned, and if that's overturned, that perhaps it's all going to go back to the states, and the states will get to decide individually, at least unless there's another congressional law that's passed subsequent to that. So I think in some ways that there's preparation for that, and I think the Alabama law is definitely to push that issue. I don't know if they're going to be successful, but I think they want to push it.
Okay, so is this going to end up in a showdown with the Supreme Court?
Well, many partners in states, the ACLU and others, have said they're already planning to pursue legal action to sue over these, so we know that's the direction that it's heading.
Okay.
I don't actually know if it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and one of the reasons is you have to have, or generally have to have, differences between lower courts, and I don't think there's going to be differences. I think the lower courts are going to find against these, at least the Alabama and potentially the Utah law, they're going to rule against it, and I don't think there's going to be people who favor it, and so there's not a controversy to push up to the Supreme Court.
A lot of pro-life supporters are saying, look, now's a good window of opportunity for us. Sure. Do you see it going to the Supreme Court?
I have the same read on the situation. I think these bills are, in particular the Alabama bill, with no exceptions for rape or incest, is really beyond what most Americans are looking for when it comes to this issue.
If it does get to the Supreme Court, what's your read on how the justices would rule on this? I mean, there are options. They could maybe chip away, they could overturn, or they could leave as is.
So, to be clear, they've already been chipping away, right? So there have been many places where there have been restrictions to access to reproductive health care, access to abortion, that have happened along the way. So I do think that it is to continue to spur legal action or Supreme Court action around this.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think chipping away is probably the most likely option. I don't think there's going to be a wholesale overturning, but I think there's an increase in pro-life sentiments, especially as technology has gotten better, right? We have ultrasounds, we can see babies as they develop, those types of things. And I think when you look at the extremes, the 6 weeks and the late-term abortions, that most people agree, right, on those issues, that pushing to the extremes makes it difficult for most Americans to get on board.
Okay, so let's get into opinions, your personal opinions at this point. Does it need to be adjusted in any way, the current law?
So I'm a person who's always going to be at the table advocating for access to health care. We know that in particular when women have health care, they have lower rates of unintended or unplanned pregnancies. So education and health care are some of my big issues, and I will always be at the table on those to ensure that we have fewer people who have to make that decision.
Would you be in favor of any changes to Roe v. Wade?
I'm in favor of big changes to our health care system.
Okay, your thoughts?
I'm absolutely pro-life, so yes, I do think there need to be changes. I actually agree, though, that if we want to prevent unwanted or unintended pregnancies, that access to health care, especially birth control, and effective information for people engaging in sexual activity by choice needs to happen. But I also think that we need to make sure that we have those exclusions that we talk about at times, right? Rape, incest, life of the mother, life of the baby.
Okay. We know one thing, this is going to play out in the courts at some level, so we'll continue to watch for that. Let's move on to 2020. Seems kind of early to talk about it, but here we are. Spencer Cox officially getting into the race for governor. Shreen, one of the things I want some thoughts from you on to start off with is he's kind of made a name for himself as someone who's bucking the party above all trend, speaking out loudly on LGBTQ issues, identity politics. Does that make him more attractive to moderates and even Democrats?
I think at this moment, Democrats are very hungry for someone who's going to clearly state where they stand on issues like supporting working families, investing in education, protecting our public lands, fighting for increased access to health care. I visited the website, tried to look for a platform. That's not there yet. I'm, willing to be impressed, but I know that at this point in time, I'm looking for somebody who's going to fight for everyday working Utahns, and I'm hopeful that that's the kind of message that we get. But given the history and the positions that have been taken in the past, it's hard for me to say that I personally would be very excited about that. Though I do know that there's also a large community, independents and moderates, Republicans and Democrats, that are looking for somebody to talk about fixes beyond partisanship.
Okay. Holly, let's bring you in. Your thoughts on Spencer Cox jumping in the race, and how does he appeal to Republicans?
Well, it's the worst kept secret in Utah, right? But I think he does appeal, and one of the things I think that is his big appeal is that he has worked to go outside of the quote unquote Republican label. Right now, it's something that I particularly appreciate. It can be so toxic, right? Especially within the really tight confines within the Republican Party, and we're seeing some change. Derek Brown being elected as the party chair, I think is a great move in the right direction. But I think that Spencer's real track to the governorship is going to rely on signature gathering. And because he can do that, he doesn't have to appeal to the far right and then to move to the middle. So he can just stay on that track.
Okay, let's talk about other potential candidates who could jump in and give him a run for the money.
Sure.
We're hearing plenty of names. Your thoughts on who possibly could be the top contenders in the race?
So I think the Huntsman rumor is an interesting one. There are certainly people that I see as a Democrat kind of looking in. I understand that there are other Republicans who are looking at the seat, but I feel like you might have more to say about that.
Any thoughts on any Democrats that might step up and make a run?
I know that conversations are happening, but I don't know that there are any names out there yet.
Okay. Thoughts on who will jump in and could potentially give?
Ben McAdams might give him a run, but I think he's got a job, so
yeah.
I don't think he's jumping in. Look, so I think John Huntsman, if he were to come back and jump into the race, he's a good campaigner. He's won before. He was well liked, actually, among the electorate. Maybe not so much among the strident Republicans, but we've already talked about that issue. And there's also some others. There's Jeff Birmingham, he's a businessman from Provo, who's made his money in the tech sector. There's Amy Winder-Newton, who I think would be a great choice. She is seriously considered jumping in the race. And then there's people like Greg Hughes and Jason Chaffetz, his name has been floated, and who else? I mean, there's, I don't know, 15 or 20 at some point.
My sources have kind of told me that at this point, Jason Chaffetz is saying no, but that could change down the road. Thomas Wright, another name.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are all eyes kind of on Huntsman to see what he's going to do before we move forward on that?
I don't know that it's a Huntsman thing, but I think sometimes there's definitely a testing of the water, and I think Spencer Cox has done a really good job of, kind of trying to navigate a path for him. He's carved out a path for him. I think his logo looks like John Deere. It plays in with his, farmer background. But there are other people as well who are going to jump in. But I think you're only going to see 2 or 3 top contenders. You're not going to see all 20 of them are not going to be equal.
Okay, real quick. One last topic before we move on. Religion and politics. Coming out during the week that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints coming out with these specialists to help members of the church get more involved in politics. Democrats were concerned about that and how it could potentially make a red state even more red. Your thoughts?
So I was a campaigner who stood on many doorsteps and spoke directly with many members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and what I found was a lot of common ground, whether it was on issues of abortion or the way that I think members of the community talk about taking care of each other, stewardship of the land. I think there's a huge opportunity, if that's going to happen, for Democrats to stand to benefit.
Do you agree with that? Could Democrats gain from more members of the church getting involved?
I actually think it's better to have more people involved. I think it's better for the discussion. I think it's better for both parties, both major parties. And I think what I see as a Republican in a heavily Republican county is that many members of the church feel like their vote doesn't matter, right? That they don't understand the issues necessarily, or if they do, they feel like their representative doesn't represent them. And so, like, why bother? And I think my understanding of the point is to educate people about the process, how they can make a difference, how they can weigh in, right? And I hope to get rid of some of the acrimony. I mean, some of our caucus meetings have been just nasty.
Any concern that it may go beyond just getting involved, though, and saying, vote for this person, vote for that issue?
I really hope not.
Okay. All right, well, we will end it on that note. Great discussion. Appreciate having both of you here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break.